Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. My name is Jim. I'm joined today by Newt and Clint, and we're going to be talking about some hog mollies today. We got some big football players that we're going to be talking about. But before we get started, Clint, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, as usual, per check-in. I think this is my third episode with you, one of the two. But no, I'm doing all right.
Cool. And Newt, how about you?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, second episode for me. Looking forward to talking about some more big boys today.
Okay, so we are going to start by going through 4 defensive tackles, and then we will be switching over to centers. So we got some big finishes here with the interior offensive line, but let's start with defensive tackle Darrell Jackson Jr. from Florida State. Newt, what can you tell us about Mr. Jackson?
So Jackson's been on kind of an interesting road, actually. A little bit of background on him before even looking at the tape. He started his collegiate career at University of Maryland. He had a decent start there, but transferred to Miami. And that was his redshirt sophomore year. He spent a year there and then transferred over to FSU. I'm sorry, no, that was his true sophomore year. Transferred to FSU, and then per NCAA guidelines, because it was his second transfer, he actually had to sit out a year. So he got to play in that bowl game that FSU got annihilated in last year. But this is like his first, I guess, real look at his time at FSU. Transferred, kind of felt like, oh man, who's the wide receiver for North Carolina last year that I'm blanking on his name? So incredibly.
Walker?
Yeah, Tez Walker. It felt like a Tez Walker thing where Tez Walker transferred back to be by his grandma. Darrell Jackson transferred to be a lot closer to his mom. Florida State's right in his backyard, so he wanted to get back there. I got a chance to see him play against Cal. I think looking at their schedule, they've obviously had kind of a gambit of opponents, but looking at his tape for Cal, he was deadly against that interior offensive line for Cal. He absolutely manhandled the left guard, and every single time he just took him for a ride back. He is really good and shows that he is a FBS talent. I think he has the ability to be an impact player for that Florida State system. But looking at him, there are a couple of deficiencies that he has. He doesn't seem to stand out in one particular area. He's okay in pass rush. He's okay in run defense, but he doesn't really stick out as a stellar early down defender or a late down pass rusher. And he really is just coming at players with a bull rush. Like I said, that Cal lineman, he was able to put on his heels, but that's just that was his move. He's just going to work him and take him chest first all the way back into the quarterback. And while it looks really good, you got to have some more moves in your belt. He's really able to do that because he's such a massive player. He is, what are the numbers on him? 6'5", 330. So for an interior guy, he's a big dude. And with that, like I said, he's not standing out in any one area, but he's not going to be a liability in one area. Like we talked about last week, Omar Norman-Lott, he's such a stellar pass rusher, but you almost don't want him on the field on early downs because he's a liability. Darrell Jackson, he's the exact opposite. He's vanilla, but he's going to be adequate and stand the test. For me, I think he needs to take advantage, and I think he still has a year of eligibility left. If I were him, I'd take advantage of that. I have him right now as a 6th, 7th rounder. Doesn't really stand out to a lot of the talent. When they got to a little bit more heavy-handed opponents, he wasn't able to do as much damage and be as much of an impact player.
So Clint, how about you? What do you think of Darrell Jackson?
First, I thought that was a fantastic kind of intro there. You taking it first, because admittedly, of the 8 we're talking about today, yeah, and this is the first lesson to not do in public speaking, is to go up and say, "Oh, I'm going to be so terrible," But if I had to pick one of the 8 that I was the least familiar with, it would have been Jackson. So I kind of like we did that first, kind of like that Newt took that first, but I could follow that up. I loved one quote you said he doesn't stand out anywhere. That was kind of a theme you had. I loved how you put that because I was going to kind of relay that into he's just a solid player. This is the kind of guy that gets taken on day 3 because somebody's going to say, we need a solid football player. We need a solid rotational nose tackle that there's nothing great about him, but there's nothing bad about him. He's just good. He's just good across the board. You said something along the lines. You said a 6th to a 7th. I had a 6th on him. So I thought that was good as well. And you mentioned his bull rush being his only move. I think that also tied into the good, not great anywhere theme of just this is going to be a guy that someone's going to take late day 3. You know, if he were to come out, assuming in this draft, someone's going to take mid day 3 to just be a big old body. And in a draft that needs some interior defensive line talent in terms of some depth there. But I don't think this one's super exciting. I mean, I will say I thought it was impressive. You kind of look at it. He's right now 10 games into the year. He's averaging about 2 pressures a game. So, you know, from an interior, there is something to build on there, particularly with his body habitus. But no, anything I would say beyond what you already did would be repetitive. You know, this guy's just a simple B gap defender. He's just a big, wide guy. I think you had that pegged.
Do you got him do you think he should come back for another year? Yeah. Obviously, you want to build that draft stock if you have that and you're only looking at day 3. I want to see him build a little bit more. Who was number 5 right next to him? I can't remember his name. The other interior player. It said that I think I read that him and Jackson were really, really good buddies. Kind of stood out in the same way to me of these are 2 guys that they're not gonna fill the stat chart, but they're solid, and you get that extra year. I think that could, especially if you're able to make that leap and put the work in, do a lot for their draft stock.
Does need to be mentioned that Florida State sucks.
Yeah, that's true. That also helps.
I was about to put something like that in.
Bit.
Florida State's not having the best season.
For perspective, I'm born and raised about a whopping hour and 45 minutes from Tallahassee. So it's I don't hate the fact that it's they blow.
Yeah. Oh, that's for sure.
I can say that just to say not to get into Florida State talk, but you're 1-9 bad. I don't know who's coming back. I don't know who the coach is. I don't know what I would just mention generally, I agree with you should go back, but all that to say you never know. That could be one where he's like, man, I ain't starting over with somebody new and jumping. I think I'm a day 3 this year. I think I'm a day 3 next year. I'm going for it.
Yeah.
And, the other thing, right, with the as Newt, as you pointed out, if you transfer and you have to sit out a year, we likely know he's not going to transfer again. And there's also a reasonable chance that Florida State is changing coaches, right?
Yeah.
Right. So there, he is a situation where if he stays in school, he may not be that new coach's favorite player. Right. So to your point, Clint, there may be merit to him coming back or coming out. I mean, just if Florida State's changing their coach, he may say, oh, that's not who I want to play for. Right. And then come out. Yep. So let's move on to Rylie Mills from Notre Dame. So Clint, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. Mills, while I say he's a simple one, he's really got some versatility to him. You've got it up there, 6'5", 295, got some solid length. I just kind of really focused tape-wise on 2022 and 2024 as far as him, what I saw. 10 sacks worth of production in 23 games from somebody of that size was really exciting. 37 hurries. I mean, it definitely gets after. I mentioned a simple B-gap defender, the previous one we talked about. I'd say that with Mills, but I think in terms of projecting him to the league, it's going to be interesting to me seeing him at 3-4. And every defensive coordinator nowadays is going to say, we're multiple. base 3-4 versus a 4-3 scheme. I'm interested to see as far as where he is tech wise, but he's somebody that I think a coach can early day 3 get creative with a little bit in terms of getting some mileage. Because I mean, hell, you look at him, you see, he's a grad, he's been around for a while. Guys got sub 4.8 speed. He's cracked a 4.8 at a 4.79 at that size. I mean, that's stupid. That alone is going to get him at least a midday 3. And the last couple little notes I had on him was just needs to keep developing his rush plan and his moves and just shedding blocks to just match the great athleticism he has. Because it's like that's not the issue, and that kind of being the theme of it, somebody's going to love him on day 3. I'd have him pegged at about between a 4th and a 5th. Somebody that you get a lot of mileage out of. But I like him. I think he's a good, solid prospect. There's a lot to work with. Him coming from the trenches at Notre Dame, he's going to be incredibly well coached. And I don't say that to say, the cliche buzzwords of, he's well coached, but really, I mean, this guy's going to be a good value early day 3, I think.
Newt, how about you?
So I love everything that Clint said. I love his take on the 3-4-4-3. I have written down 3-4 defensive end, and I think it's just that. Like exactly.
Agreed.
Like
I think that's
what he's getting.
What he's going to do more in the league. You said that better, but yeah.
No, perfect. He kind of reminds me, not body type wise, but like that position that Braden Fisk plays for the Rams right now, where he's an interior player, but he's that defensive end in a 3-4 scheme. So I think he's going to sit there. I completely agree with Clint there. Everything you said, his smarts, his length, I love all that. So I'm going to deviate a little bit though, because I'm going to put the Newt Weston, like my guy stamp, and it's going flat on Rylie Mills' Golden Dome helmet. I have him as a late second, early third rounder right now. It's projection, like 100%, but this guy with his pass rush, we talked about last week, Omar Norman Lott, how he might be the best pass rusher in this defensive tackle class. I think Rylie Mills might give him a run for his money. Like, he is 7 sacks this year, paired with the 3, like Clinton said, make 10 over the last 2 years. He's got, 24 pressures on the quarterback this year, almost half of them being, not half of them, I'm sorry, almost a third of them being sacks. He knows how to get after it. He is disruptive. I saw him against Georgia Tech, and he had, I think, 2 sacks in that game, was extremely good in both the pass and the run game. The run game is definitely his weakness. He needs to clean that up and get that a little bit more where he is able to hold his gap. But I bring up Omar Norman Lott because I want to showcase where I am with him in that pass rush and how effective he is. The issues with Omar Norman Lott were character concerns, were durability concerns, were his ability to be effective on early downs. I don't think Rylie Mills is a liability. He can improve it, but I don't think he's a liability. I think Rylie Mills, as a character, you look at him, he is a 2-year starter. He's a captain of that football team. He is under a program where you look at the coaching and how that spreads to the culture there. I don't think anyone's going to argue that Notre Dame doesn't breed high character football players. And with all of that, he's kind of setting himself up to be, what you're getting with that little bit of Omar Norman Lott, but then everything else is like, hey, this is the football player I want. Extremely coachable. He's already got that kind of tenacity to get after the quarterback. I love the guy. I think, he is going to be someone that if you can get your hands on him, you get in the right system. While I'm probably going to be high on him, I don't think he'll be that high, but in my mind, I would have a late second, early third grade on him. He's a stellar football player. I love this guy. I'm going to pound the table for him over and over. I think most people are definitely be where Clint is, though. But for me, I think Rylie Mills is going to be a little bit of a sleeper and really come out this draft.
Well, and I would just kind of round that up by saying, I think the second round's a little excited, but I don't think saying the third, it kind of goes back to what I said about this interior class of needs. a riser. And you mentioned the point about his pass rushing production. It's not crazy to think late third, somebody's like, oh, this is like you just said, we're pounding the table. Oh, we maybe could wait 10, 15 picks on this guy, but we don't want to mess around with it. I'm pounding the table. I got to have him. It's like, no, that's not crazy.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you see it that way. I just, like this guy, think he's going to be someone that is creepy and sneaky good. So yeah, that's my take on Rylie Mills. I was possibly looking forward to him more than anyone this show.
Cool. So 2 questions. So first of all, well, actually 1 comment, then a question. So generally speaking, like I love it when people don't have the same ranking on a player because we're going to learn more from our differences than we will if we always agree. Okay. So this show is a safe space. We're not going to criticize anybody's grade on a player. But what I heard is both of you see Rylie Mills the same way. It's just about how much that's valued in the draft process, right? So Newt, you're a Packers fan, correct?
Oh, yeah. Born and raised.
Yeah. So if Mills to the Packers, round 3, round 4, like you think he wouldn't be there by the time Green Bay picks?
Yeah, buddy, we can't just look at him and see a Green Bay Packer jersey on Mills. I don't know what to tell you.
Man, that's like I'm seeing like, Kenny Clark on his way out, Rylie Mills on his way in, just living that decade in green and gold. Oh man, that would be hopefully the Packers are picking where I want them to be in that like 80 to 90 range in that 3rd round. Oh man, I'd love to see Rylie Mills going right there.
Okay. And Clint, you're a Falcons fan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think of Mills in a Falcons jersey?
I think a pretty top of mind, easy way to relate is Zach Harrison. We took Zach Harrison 75th overall in the 3rd round 2 years ago. And, coming out of Ohio State, this kind of freak body habitus, 6'5", 275. They've gotten him up to 290 at this point. Kicking inside, playing some interior, but mostly a 3 tech. Hell, he plays a lot of 5 tech too. I mean, they kick to go back to us saying somebody that moves all around. They got a ton of mileage in the 3rd round and wanted a player with some high upside. I think that's kind of how I would project them as far as this Falcons team. If I were to talk about Mills, Falcons don't have a 3rd round pick this year, so it'd have to be more in that 4th territory. But no, he's definitely a name that I've had. I think I did a write up 1 week college football weekend about potential Falcons to watch, and I discussed Mills in the past few weeks at SI at some point. But that kind of be the easy way I'd kind of relate him to that. But no, I mean, he's definitely somebody on their list and that I'd be happy with. Like we said, I said a 4th round grade. If I looked up with that 4th round pick and we took him, I'd be giving the golf clap.
Cool. Okay, so we are going to pivot now to DeMonte Capehart from Clemson. So, Clint, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, Capehart's kind of, to me, if you were to just look at like a balance sheet of the guys we're talking about today, I think he's the most interesting of the ones we're talking about. It's like, as you look at him, he's a grad, but in his last 3 years, he's played in 30 games, but he's got 1 sack of production, 13 hurries. He's only played like 400 snaps worth of football at Clemson to have been a grad. And like I said, he's participated in 30 games. So the definition of guys been rotational. And, they've always got talent there. I mean, hell, you just brought up the Falcons point. Rukaroro, 2nd round pick last year, 35th overall out of Clemson, 98th percentile athlete. Didn't play till he was 17. All the traits. We picked him a little high. All that to say, Bresci, we could sit here and keep going. You get the point. Miles Murphy, all right, I'm going to be quiet. But all that to say, someone that's had to wait his turn, but the production hadn't been there as much. But there's a nice split. I mean, when I looked at his snap disparity, it was about 75% in the B gap, 25% in the A gap. So somebody, you can look at the photo of him right there. He's an incredibly well-built kid. If you've never seen him until you're looking right at this photo, Got a great pedigree. I mean, he played at IMG. If you're not familiar, that's like the Ferrari or Lamborghini of high school football programs.
That's the place to be.
Pretty well put. Yeah. But, this guy's just a damn big two-gap and solid. Not to sound repetitive of what I said about the first player we discussed, about somebody that just wants to take a big body, day 3 rotational player. My one negative comment, actually, no. I'll end this with one negative and I'll end this with one positive. Kid's got insane speed. Like, he's got sub 4.8 speed, like we said earlier, which, at that size is crazy. His pad level sucks to the point of, this is a day 3 guy that's going to get coached up and get brought in, not to be let's use the Falcons example, but you mentioned it a second ago. We took Brandon Dorless as a 5 tech out of Oregon in the 4th round last year. Somebody that I had a 3rd round grade on, so I thought it was a hell of a steal. And they've slow played him coming in, but somebody, like I said, with that, I literally had my notes here. This guy's kind of like Rook light. Somebody's gonna have to coach him up for a while, but day 3, I get it. I hadn't seen as much of him. He didn't get me quite as fired up. And I would echo what I said earlier about, if you'd asked me coming into this episode, the 2 guys I'd have been the most interested to hear Newt discuss, it would have been the first one we did, and it would have been Capehart right now.
Okay. So we'll pivot that then to Newt. So Newt, what do you want to tell us about Capehart? You're muted.
Thanks. I echo like every single thing that Clint just said. And, for me, everything about like his technical ability and his technique and pad level, I think it comes from the fact that he's a first-year starter. Like, he has just been a rotational player, but there's a reason for that. They've gone through Brazili, Murphy, Aurora. There's so many players that have come through that Clemson system that have had him made him wait his turn, where he's had a lot of guys to learn from, obviously, in front of him, which is really nice. But at the end of the day, you got to get out there and you got to do it for yourself. So I think he really suffers from that experience. He doesn't have that technical ability, but he has the gifts of what you want from an interior defender. That size and weight profile, he wears it so incredibly well. The first thing for any player I'm looking at is I'm going to go to the team website. I'm going to read their bio, look for any accolades. DeMonte Capehart, by the way, all ACC academic. Love seeing that right away. Tells me you're a smart player. You get things done. You're, a positive character for that team. But they had a clip from Twitter of him from 2023 annihilating the right guard from UNC. He got off the line and I swear to God threw this guy in the air and he went back about 4 yards. It was insane. I was like, holy shit, what am I looking at right here? I need to see this guy more. And obviously, like, it's a highlight and every play is not like that, but it's a little bit of inconsistency. Sometimes he does get that really good push and he's able to really make that. Other times, technically, he gets buried by an offensive guard or center who's a lot better with his hands and he's able to create leverage or whatever it may be. I think right now, if he was to stay on a track, DeMonte Capehart, as is, would make a pretty solid rotational player in the NFL. I think if he can, figure out some of the minor nuances of his game and put those pieces together, he could, evolve into a little bit more of that prominent, okay, we're going to have you on the field for 75, 80% of the snaps defensively and get the most out of you. I got a 4th, 5th round grade on him right now. I think that there's a lot that he has to go through in terms of like coaching, and you need to have an NFL defensive line coach get their hands on him. He's not a first-year starter. He's not a second-year starter. He's going to be a rotation player, someone that's in there for a breather, but he's got a lot of potential because of his frame, because of how he wears that weight, because of his overall strength, where he can be a disruptor, and he can be a really, really good 3-down defensive lineman.
Cool. Okay, last defensive lineman. We are saving the best for last. So, Newt, you want to kick off Tyleik Willams from Ohio State?
Yeah, I think I watched the most tape on Tyleik Willams because as much as I try not to, he was one player that I just couldn't get away from the media in terms of like, where does Brugler have him at? Where's PFF have him at? Where does the Athletic? All of those sources, they've got an opinion on Tyleik Willams, and it's generally speaking really, really high. Like I'm talking, top 32 high. They're thinking he's going to go in the first round. So, I had this kind of preconceived notion in my head going in. I'm thinking of first round defensive tackles that I've seen over the last couple of years, Johnny Newton, Byron Murphy the second. Going back before that, my mind just, of course, immediately erases. But, those two guys were ones that like I was thinking really, really close to. And I was a little let down, tell you the truth. Looking at the first game, I watched him play against Oregon. Trying to grab, who's going to be Ohio State's best opponent, or Oregon, obviously, with them being the number one team in the country. It was something where it was a lot of inconsistencies for me. He, on some plays, would slip a lineman really, really quickly and get in the back and blow it up. And then other plays, he'd get pushed off his spot way easier than I would expect him to. I'm not sure, and it kind of goes back to maybe some other things. If he's always trying to go for the big play and blow things up continuously, I saw him versus Akron, and Ohio State versus Akron. You can imagine the difference in talent. He was having his way with the guards from Akron. I mean, just getting them down, throwing them past, and going. But even then, he did a really bad job of maintaining gap integrity. He'd get around the guard, but then it was enough time where the running back's already by him through that massive hole that he had opened up. So I want to see, I think, for him, more consistency in that play where he's maintaining those gaps. He's doing it down to down. He's in no doubt of my mind a 3-down defensive lineman. He excels against the run, but he will get good push and he will be able to close a pocket at an adequate pace. He's not, a stellar pass rusher, but he's going to be a player that if you can just, once again, get a couple things technically fixed, that I by no means would be surprised to see him go on day one. End of day one, for sure. He's not a true first round grade, in my opinion. Right now, I have him with a mid-second round grade. I got a chance to see some other ones, and he is so dang impressive against the run. And I think that's one thing where if you're able to be on the field early downs and then can be adequate in late downs, you're going to find a home and you're going to, capture the hearts of any defensive coordinator. But with all of those things, he's not quite the player I expected him to be. I want him to be a little bit more of like, hey, I'm really standing out. Like him next to Ty Hamilton, I expected to see kind of a bigger gap. Obviously, Ty Hamilton's he's a draftable player. I think I had him with a 5th round grade, but it wasn't quite as big as I wanted it to be. So that's where I'm at on Tyleik. I think he's a stellar player. I think he's a day 2 guy for sure. But he's definitely someone that is going to be a dang good football player.
So, Clint, how about you? What do you think of Tyleik Willams?
A couple things. I think, I would echo. I've got an early 2 on Tyleik, but I also think with this class, you said he's not a true first-round grade, and I would echo that, but I think this isn't a traditional first-round year. And I think it's hard for us to project right now kind of some of the fluctuation in markets versus what's historically traditional. Like I could see this year there being more patience on edge rushers. There being more patience on receivers versus there being less patience on offensive and defensive interior. So I think that could change. Somebody like him being more of a early second, gone by pick 45, pick 50 kind of guy, maybe getting himself into the bottom of round 1 for the right fit. You mentioned his run stopping ability. That's going to be a selling card. So it's like, okay, look at the bottom of round 1. Who are some teams that need a real, run stop and plug, 3-tech with some upside? Obviously the guy's got sub 4.7 speed. He's clocked 4.68. I doubt he'd get quite that good at the combine, but 4.7 kind of speed at that size is just asinine. That's the kind of guy you bet on late round 1 for a team that doesn't have a lot of holes. I mean, could you imagine this guy with D'Amico in Houston with their run stop needs? Could you imagine this guy with Harbaugh? How many years we've been saying that the Chargers need some help on the defensive interior? Just depending on how the market kind of goes, that'd be a couple 2 names.
It would not surprise me to see him go late to Buffalo either.
That's another name. That's a good.
We need a 1-tech. Buffalo needs a 1-tech. We only have 1 under contract for next year. So
45 games worth of playing Ohio State, 9 sacks. Said in his last 20 games, he's got 5 sacks. So that's going to sell always. I talk so much about the market versus historically traditional. What it is, it's like it don't matter what the market is, if it's the Great Depression or if it's today or if it's 20 years ago. Sack sells. Ha ha. Clint hits the drums over here. Yeah. But I like the way you laid it out, Newt, talking about him being more consistent in his production for somebody with the kind of athletic ability he has. And you already alluded to it. I think just some of his gap discipline, not going too far out of his pass rush lane and things like that. But for a late 1, early 2, somebody's going to say that that's getting nitpicky. And I think Tyleik's going to be a fun one in terms of just if you follow draft media and things of the like, there's going to be a lot of variance. Like you're going to see people that have Williams as their 20th player, and then you're going to see people that got him as their 65th player. And to me, that's fun, and that's where you kind of see, who wants to get ballsy at the bottom of round 1, who wants to get a steal in the middle of the second, and he's going to be a fun one for that.
Can I actually? That's hilarious. I keep like data on every big name draft board out there. The highest on Tyleik is 68th that I have, and the lowest is 18. Your estimate is like just square on. That's amazing, Clint.
Newt, to me, that's actually it's the players with the high variance that, in my opinion, we want to talk about the most. I can guarantee to the people that are listening right now, this is not the last time you're going to hear Tyleik Willams' name on this channel, right? We have podcast content every day. We will be doing defensive tackles, and Newt and Clint have it this cycle. But then once the NFL season ends, there's going to be different podcasters on this channel. They're going to be reviewing the same thing that Clint and Newt did. And the idea is to try to see when there's variance, why is the person putting him at 68? So one of the things I had heard about Tyleik Willams midseason is that he's not a pass rusher. He's a 2-down defensive tackle. Okay. I am a huge proponent of you don't take a 2-down player in round 1. Right. So the guy that the Titans took last year, I'm already forgetting his name. T'Vondre Sweat.
Yeah.
Right. Like when I see a player like that, if he can't play 3 downs, you don't take him in round 1. As much as you think your team needs that run stuffer, it's just not the right value for what you're going to end up paying the player. And you can get that day 2 or day 3. You don't need to use a premium day 1 pick on it. So I think that's why he's at 68 on some boards.
I'm actually curious. Clint, I don't know how many defensive interior players have you gotten a chance to look at, or have you like kind of ranked on your own?
I'm pretty deep in it at this point.
Where do you have Tyleik at?
I mean, as far as the interiors, you could just quickly hammer it. I mean, Mason Graham's the obvious one.
Yep.
That's going to be consensus. Kenneth Grant, I get being up there. I think a lot of people have cooled on Deion Walker, but he is what he is. That steam will pick up some. Walter Nolan's going to be the real fun one. That's going to be the fun. But I don't see any argument how he's not top 5. Derek Harmon's that guy that's really like backhanding people with like, you came out of your summer scouting going into the season saying, oh yeah, early day 3 guy. All of a sudden we're looking up and people are slapping top 25 grades on him. So I still think it's a little up in the air, but an easy wussy answer for you is no, he's a top 5 defensive interior and he's going to be drafted as such.
I have him actually, straight up at number 5.
You talked.
I'm sorry. I have him at 4. I have him at 4.
We talked about the bottom of round 1, and in that conversation earlier, if I had to bet $100 today, like I think somebody like Walter Nolan goes before Tyleik. Somebody will bet on we talk about the bottom of round 1. Somebody's gonna. What did I say earlier about the? I just want to get a good, solid player. That's where people start to get frisky.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I got same thing you said. Graham, Nolan, Grant, and then Tyleik pops his way in. And then
so you have
a lot of
Tyleik
people like
Williams
TJ
ahead of
Sanders
Harmon
too out of Carolina.
I have this cluster right now. You're gonna have some fun with this one. I have Tyleik Williams. I then have Rylie Mills, and then I have Harmon, and then I have Walker.
But see, I even think for not speaking for you, I'm speaking for myself. Like I don't care how high you are on Harmon or how high you've been on Harmon. You even, no matter who you are, you kind of got to catch up to market a little bit with him and just the tape he's put out there developmentally this year. Like, I'm trying to think of an example from another position group I can compare that. I got one off the top of my head. I was in on Jahdae Barron out of Texas before everybody. I'll claim that one. Even then, I've had to catch up to him this year, the last month or two. Like, I was calling that guy to go out last year. I thought he was a top 75 pick. Now it's like everybody and his brother's pegging him between like 25 and 50. And like, hell, I had to catch myself up the other day mocking him at 24 to Baltimore. And I was like, hello. It's like just to say, I think for anybody that's maybe, giving themselves a quote unquote hard time about, I'm too low on Harmon right now. You're supposed to be. It sounds smart ass, but it's the truth.
It's not good.
Everyone's going to have to kind of catch up there. I mean, I am. If you asked me just now, you said, where does he have all this stuff up? And I was a little jumbled trying to get it in my brain. Just, it's that group it's one of the fun ones. What did we say earlier? Jim said about, I want to discuss more of the guys that there's differences in. What did I just say? Yes. Oh, Mason Graham's number 1. We know that.
Yeah.
Well, and on this channel, ultimately, right, we're giving some guys some time. The first 3 guys we covered, you're probably not going to find too many podcasts that spend 8 minutes on the first 2 guys that we covered, right? We gave those guys a lot of good time, and my entire passion and motivation for starting this was because the draft needs to be covered this way. We need to give the guys like Rylie Mills and Tyleik Williams, we need to give them some time, like airtime, so people can talk about who they are as a player.
Hey, look, you're the weird kid in class when you're the kid in school that's talking about how day 3 is where the real meat and potatoes are.
Oh, yeah, that take, I don't know if that take went too well on Twitter where I was saying that you build a roster in rounds 3 through 5. You don't build it in rounds 1 and 2. But
this is the truth, though.
Yeah. So before we jump to the interior offensive line, I want to say thank you to everybody that is watching right now. So I see all of you. Thank you very much. Please take a moment and hit the like button on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the like button on Twitter if that's where you're listening to this. And give at NFL Draft _ Weston a follow. Give Clint at NFL Draftdome a follow. I'm Jim. I'm at NFL Draft Fanatic. There is no I in Fanatic on my Twitter. Give us each a follow. If there are players you want to learn about them, we didn't talk about them this episode. They're probably planned for another episode, but if they're not, all you have to do is gently say, hey, I'm interested in like what the scouting report is on this guy, as opposed to giving you a 2-sentence reply on Twitter. We'll give your guy 4 to 8 minutes on this podcast. So with that being said, we're going to switch to interior offensive line. We're going to go over 4 of the better centers in the draft. And Clint, you want to start with Jonah Monheim from USC?
You know, while Monheim is a guy that's so versatile, I don't think he's somebody that, you know, speaking for myself, that I got to talk about very long. I think it's pretty simple of what you're going for if you were to take him. I mean, you look at his snap allocation in his time at Southern Cal, 762 snaps at left tackle, 716 snaps at right tackle, 668 snaps at center, 339 snaps at right guard, for a total of just a hair under 2,500. That's his selling point to get paid. You know, if he's in a draft meeting or something, the whole fact that he's a 5 tool is how he's going to get sold. And even more importantly, as a 5 tool, he's got the center tool. You know, I think everybody likes to talk about how rare, you know, a left tackle of that caliber is. It's really center's even more impressive to me. When you cut on the tape and you're just like, this guy's got it. Particularly to value a guy you can project day 2, day 3. I mean, hell, when you look at the production on the guy, only saw 2 sacks on him in 2,500 snaps, and that was at left tackle where he's not naturally inclined. Could you get snaps out of him there if you needed? Yes. Where's he going to get paid in the league? Where you've got him in the graphic at center. Really excited. That's a guy I'd love to see, like in Mobile, just going center, one-on-ones, instructed all of it. You know, like I said, I had on here, guy's strong as can be. He's got great feet. He's a 5 tool, and your nitpicky note is his get off could be a little better and improved on. I mean, when you're talking about that kind of size at center, he gets me. You talk about his tools, particularly at guard or center. It kind of gets me that kind of excitement. Remember, like Joe Tippmann coming out in the last few years is that guy that you look at as a center, and you're like, dude, you're like 6'5", 6'6". You look like some mammoth left guard, but really he just kills it on the interior. You get a ton of mileage out of him. I mean, I like him a lot. I've got a 4th-round grade on Monheim right now, as somebody to just get a ton of mileage of. And I, you know, I said this earlier about this interior line, offensive and defensive. There's so much variance. It's going to change. Like, I'm sitting here right now telling you, I think it's a 4th round. I wouldn't think I was stoned to tell you that in 2 months I could tell you he could be a 3rd rounder, or I could come back in 2 months and tell you he's a 5th rounder. He's a fun one. If you were to ask me going into this episode of the 8 guys who I enjoyed, kind of, you know, doing a little refresher before I came on and kind of checking my notes and watching the tape, it's like I might be a lifelong Georgia Bulldog fan. I don't cover the Dogs. I cover the Falcons, but I'm a lifelong Georgia fan. I've been to 100+. All that to say, Jared Wilson is in this, but I personally enjoyed Monheim the most.
Cool. Newt, how about you? What do you think of Monheim?
I don't know how much I have to add to that. That was like, I mean, perfect. The point of, you know, he's played damn near 3,000 snaps, and of that, he's had significant snaps at 4 of the 5 positions is ridiculously impressive.
Dude, how close the ballots was. I mean, you heard those first 3 numbers. I said 762, 716, 668.
Yeah, it's insane. And then obviously like right tackle, where he got a chance to, you know, play basically 2 seasons for. But like, it's just like he moves around left and right. I remember, you know, doing some summer scouting on him. It's like, okay, he hasn't played a snap at center. And he last year played pretty much all left tackle for them. But no, we're just moving to center because he's just that good of an offensive lineman. It's crazy.
And he's playing that left tackle role with the number 1 overall pick at quarterback running.
That's
around.
true. Yep. So, you know, once again, 3-star recruit, redshirt senior, seen a ton of action. captain, 22 years old. He's, really, really well versed in college ball, but it's not like he's, coming out where he's, 25, 26 years old and he got a ton of baggage on him. I think he's got experience, not wear on the tires. That's the way that I would put it. And I think Clint did a really good job of highlighting that. Everything that he said is exactly how I view him. I like him. I don't think he's the best center in this class. I like some other guys a little bit more. I think that he is going to be the best 6 offensive linemen that you could get for your team and have like no worries whatsoever. I got a 4th or 5th round grade on him, pretty close to where Clint sees him. And once again, if I saw, him go off the board, early day 3 and, needs have been met and you're just getting that 6 offensive lineman that you can literally put in all 5 spots. All right. Sounds good. I don't know if he'll ever carve out a role as a starting center in the league, but I think he'll carve out a role as that swing tackle, that do-it-all guy. He starts, half the games because of how many injuries you see to offensive linemen, or, he is the guy that can step in, when you see a guy that has underperformed or hasn't been able to live up to expectations. I think he's got a long career ahead of him. I don't think it's not going to be a sexy career in my opinion. But he's going to be that guy that you love to have. He's like that backup quarterback that everyone loves, that, he does the dirty work. I'm a Packer fan. I'm like Matt Flynn to me. I love the guy. He's not, getting any records. He's not breaking jersey sales, but there's something about that guy.
Matt Schaub down in Atlanta would be my name to match you on that.
It's just that's Jonah Monheim to me. It's not sexy, the job he's going to do.
I'll throw you a team name that just matched everything you just set up there as far as the need, his center and guard, and if you had to get him a little swing tackle play and kind of his just style fits in. It's like, look at the needs and the draft capital for Detroit.
Yeah,
you don't think this couldn't roll with Dan Campbell and them getting some guard and center play out of him, and then if Sewell was banged up and needed a week off at right tackle, you could throw Monheim out there and he wouldn't get his ass whipped. It's like
that's the system that you go to if you're Monheim. I mean, like obviously he's going to want to be a starting center. Like I get it, like 100%. But man, if you're like willing to make your bread and butter is like that guy that does the dirty work, you got an awesome career ahead of you and a fan base that's going to just love the hell out of you.
And I think something that's not being talked about yet, but this is not the first podcast that I've said this on. This is going to be a really good interior offensive line class. And I'll just give a couple of data points. Dane Brugler had 4 players in his top 50 that were interior. Okay. Then Donovan Jackson wasn't on that list. Tate Ratledge wasn't on that list. Dylan Fairchild wasn't on that list. And there's still at least one other guy that is escaping me that I thought would have been like in the top 100, wasn't on the list. And then I'm also going to add, there's the guy from Oregon State, the tackle who's probably going to kick in, Josh Gray. So Josh Gray wasn't on that list, but other people that have followed this podcast have Joshua Gray sitting square in the 2nd round, right? So if you haven't heard that, find that podcast. But the reason why I'm pointing that out is we're talking with Monheim here. Monheim may not even be in the top 10 of the interior offensive line of the class. Yet, as Clint and Newt pointed out, he can play every offensive line position. So if you're sitting there in round 4 or round 5, and you have a guy that's going to be able to come in and back up 5 offensive line positions, he's going to be able to make the 53. He's going to be one of the 48 that dress on Sundays because he's going to be able to save you a roster spot.
Well, in a bigger, most experienced rookie, the kid's got 2,500 plus 3,000 snaps.
Yeah.
Yep.
Easy. He's going to be just that guy that steps in and is like, it's already taken care of. You know what's going on.
Okay. So I think Parker Brailsford was probably consensus center one from preseason scouting. But Newt, why don't you kick off Parker Brailsford and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, to echo that, Parker Brailsford was my center one preseason scouting. 3-star recruit, redshirted, didn't take a single snap at Washington his freshman year, was part of that awesome run that they had last year, and then followed his coach over to Alabama this year. He was just an absolute freak that first time he was out there playing for Washington. Freshman, All-American first, team preseason All-American coming into the year this year to kind of bolster that point. He's an athlete. I mean, pure and simple. I've heard the name Jason Kelsey thrown around in the same sentence as Parker Brailsford. You know, the one thing that, you know, echoes that comp is the kid's light. I mean, I've seen some thoughts out there that he's not even 290, more like 285, 280, or at least what he was playing at Washington. Probably got up to around there now, but, you know, if Alabama's listening to him at 290, I'm going to take 5 pounds off that to start with. So
290 with a soaking wet towel.
Exactly.
A really good lunch.
Yeah, exactly. So he is light. So that a really, really big point against them is going to be that the trenches is a big man's game. I don't care how much you talk about how great of an athlete a player is, how quick they can move and get leverage on a guy. It's a big man's game. So it's a big detriment against him. But I think, you know, right now he's finally getting to that draftable range. You talk about Bryce Young a couple years ago and all the talk around him and his height and kind of being in that fringe. I think that's where Parker Brailsford is a little bit, but I think he's eclipsed that a little bit more. You know, one of the other centers that I got a chance to look at was Logan Jones, 293. So it's not like it's
you dog taking you guy. That's my guy. That's my guy. No, I'm not cutting you off. I apologize for cutting you off.
You're
I'm
good.
saying that to echo you and be like, go, go.
Yeah,
that's my guy in the center group.
So Logan Jones, 293. So it's not like it's a blip on the radar. You can play at that, but that's about as light as I'll be comfortable with you getting is that 290 range. So once you move past that and you kind of get past the measurables and you get past a lot of the accolades moving in and you look at where he's at, this kid lives up to the hype. He is a stellar interior offensive lineman. I shared a clip out on Twitter of him, you know, coming up from the snap, looking up. You got a nose tackle rushing right at him, and his hands just come out quick as lightning. And the guy is a yard off to the side. It's insane the amount of technical ability that he has developed as a really young player. I mean, he's a redshirt sophomore at this point. He's 21 years old. He's not like overly experienced because he didn't take a single snap his freshman year at Washington. He stepped in and he was a freshman All-American, and he's obviously, you know, put in the work, ground out everything that he needed to do to get to this point. He's, because of that frame, in my opinion, never going to be like that people mover, run blocking center that's just going to like clear the way out for a dive play on every down. But like you cannot expect that from this player. He's going to fit the modern day NFL. He's going to be a really, really good player at doing that because he is a stellar pass blocker. I mean, if you look at, and whether or not you look at PFF and you're like, oh, that's garbage or you know, that's the truth. However you just decide to slice it, you know, his grades week in and week out, pass blocking, you know, stellar grades, 80s, 90s. He's putting up numbers for pass blocking that you would expect to see for a top tier prospect against the best defenses in the country. He's playing against Georgia. He's playing against Texas. He's playing against Tennessee, all of these SEC teams. I love Parker Brailsford. Right now, I've got about a really, really solid, maybe even like early 3rd round grade on him. He's not a Tyler Linderbaum to me. He's not even a Zach Frazier to me, where I'm like, yeah, this is the guy. I think the centers in this class are a little bit pulled back for me, but I think he's a really, really good player that could be pretty easily a day 1 starter, if not a year 1 starter.
So, Clint, how about you?
A couple of things. you piggybacking off you mentioned, the fact they've got him at 290. That kid must have showed up his true freshman year at Washington at what, 275? Like
if that. I think he played last year at 275.
I'm not saying that mocking him. I'm saying that marveling. It's like, and this is totally me BSing it, but it's like, for further perspective to somebody, let's make it a more common football position. Let's say it's a middle linebacker. This is like saying that Georgia or Alabama signed a $195 linebacker. I mean, like, seriously, it's wild. It's like, for you to be a 195-pound backer that got signed by Kirby Smart, you would either have to be so blazing fast or hit somebody so hard like a Ford truck. Like, you'd have to have some freak, trait, And his freak trait with Brailsford is the athleticism and the mental makeup. Like you said, you mentioned the quick hands and the recognition at the nose tackle come downhill on him. I'm lower on him than consensus just because I can't get over the weight. I can't. That guy's.
That is totally fair. Like, I 100% understand that.
He's 290. I mean, and I know exactly how to sum my thought on this. If I were to say that I've just got to bet on the super 98th, 99th percentile athlete, the speed demon, the upside, I'm shooting for the ceiling. I'm not as much worrying about the floor center. And we're going to get to this guy. I take Jared Wilson, who's got 25 pounds on Brailsford, 20 at least. It's like, that's where I'm leaning versus Brailsford. I'd be looking at this kid saying, you need to go back to Tuscaloosa and get in the gym. And just, it's like, let's just pretend for conversation purposes. Let's say he's really 290. You know what? I can't even pretend. He ain't 290. Let's say he's 285. If we were to have the same talk a year from now and said that the kid was 294, it'd be a different conversation. If he threw on 9-10 good, real pounds, which is realistic there, it's like, this is a kid that needs to go back, and I don't think the center market next year is anything that's going to scare him away from somebody, a DeBauer or of the like that knows what they're doing, looking at him and being like, kid, let's say you go center 5 this year. You gonna go center 1 next year. You gonna go center 2. He's just somebody that if I had to pick one guy on this episode of the 8 that I'd look at and be like, go back to school and get in the gym, make some NIL money, and enjoy being a big man on campus, it would have been Brailsford.
So, all right, here's a question for you. Parker Brailsford goes back and magic scale, he steps on it, and the entire country knows he pops 301. Plays the exact same way he has, gains a little bit in run leverage because he's got that little bit better of a moment of inertia behind him. Are we talking about a Tyler Linderbaum? Are we talking about Graham? Why am I blanking on
Barton?
Is it Graham Barton?
Barton, thank you.
Barton was my dog. Trust me.
I love Barton. And Barton, Barton obviously didn't play center projected in there, but are we talking about a Linderbaum if he goes back?
I think it's different in the fact that just take the 2 names you just said. Linderbaum is by nature a mauler. Linderbaum is that high school wrestler that's going to plant your ass versus the light on the feet, athletic, quick twitch. Has that obviously. But that's not what gets him paid with a 99th percentile. I don't think Brailsford's got that kind of dog. I don't think he's going to bury you. He's definitely not. I think his body habitus has a certain ceiling in terms of the weight you can put on him. But it's what you said the Kelsey note, and that's the one thing I want. If I could get to one thing before we moved on, it'd be that. You said the Kelsey note. It's what do you want here? It's like, do you want the overpowering center? Do you want the Linderbaum? Do you want the Cam Jurgens? Or do you want to go for more of the technical, super athletic, fast, quick on his feet, leader, play recognition, just freak feet? You know, do you want you said Kelsey. Drew Dahlman in Atlanta is more of that kind of character. Do you the name that I was going to throw, because you said Kelsey, that's an extreme example. It's kind of like a David Andrews kind of situation.
Yeah.
New England. Andrews coming out of Georgia. Guy's never been a pound over 290, 295. And hell, he's played 10 years. I think it's kind of what do you want there. I'm not as high on Brailsford right now. I'd have about a 4th round grade on him. I know I'd be lower than consensus by a good bit. I just think a kid needs to get in the gym and get some weight on him. He's a redshirt sophomore, dude. It's like he's got time. It's not like he's like, if I go back next year, I'm going to walk into, not a center, but, Bruce Matthews is in the next draft. I'm screwed, no.
Yeah. So one point is as I think of let's say undersized interior offensive linemen or undersized centers. So being a Bills fan, we got rid of Mitch Morse, who was a lighter center, to replace him with Connor McGovern. So I like to say, are you a regular season center or are you a playoff center? And here's what I mean. So if we all remember the long pass that Josh Allen threw incomplete to Stephon Diggs against Kansas City last year, everybody will blame Diggs, but Chris Jones was in Josh Allen's face. And that was because Chris Jones will overpower most NFL centers. But specifically, he overpowered Mitch Morse. Okay.
Chris Jones going to take Brailsford to the woodshed.
Right. So, okay, we just came off Buffalo, Kansas City. And as best I could tell, most of the country was watching it. Okay. On that Josh Allen touchdown, a bigger interior offensive lineman handled Chris Jones. Right? And while that wasn't a playoff game, Buffalo recognized that in order to get by the Kansas City hump in the playoffs, we needed a bigger interior.
See, I love that mention. And I could tie it into Atlanta really quickly. I just said Dahlman a second ago. You know why Dahlman works very well here? Because you paired him with the two meat eater. Matt Bergeron is a tackle kind of build. Coming out of Syracuse, kid would have been a 2nd-round tackle, goes 38th as a guard to Atlanta. He's a mauler. And then Chris Lindstrom is the best right guard in the NFL. I'd argue that to the death. It's with those two hogs next to him, and then Jake Matthews at left tackle, who's been doing this for 28 years, it's you can do the more of the guy sub 300, technically sound real light on his feet. It's he can handle that. Yeah, if I paired him with, some of the guard talent you're getting out of the Seattles and the Detroit I mentioned, and the Cleveland, and some of these lines that are a little older and more beat up, it's New Orleans, we're getting a little dicier. I love that you mentioned it like that, because that was a good way of tying into what I said about what are you trying to get? What do you need? And I think that is a good reminder. We talk so much about projecting these players. You got to remember, it takes one team to fall in love with them. It takes one team for them to be the perfect schematic fit. It takes one. It's I like that. It's there's going to be somebody that looks up. Let's assume Brailsford comes out. There's going to be somebody that looks up and it's I got two absolute hogs at guard. These guys are just straight meatheads. But I'm going to get the big light on his feet, technical guy that can lead them. It's that was very well put.
That's good. It makes me think of Dickerson getting drafted in Philadelphia, right next to Kelsey. There's obviously
that's what I mean. Yeah,
they're doing it intentionally. They're putting this just mammoth of a man next to him, and protecting their bread and butter with Kelsey. I love that call out. I think it's really smart.
Cool. So, Newt, you want to kick off Jared Wilson from Georgia?
Yeah, so Jared Wilson's another guy I got to watch a ton of tape on. So 3-star recruit, redshirt junior, with Van Pran coming out last year. This is his first year as a starter. Obviously, he's had a little bit of time here and there since Georgia is, I don't know if you've seen, but just an absolute manhandling of a team. Usually the second you get to play. He's had a little bit here and there, but this is like, hey, here's your first taste of top SEC talent to block. He's only 21 years old. But with that, I really like Jared Wilson. I think that he already shows really good strength for the position. It's not like he's coming in, some of the guys we take a look at are, touching 330 even. Bryce Foster is up there listed at that. Jake Majors listed at 315. There's some big boys out there. He's kind of sitting in that happy middle where I think he's got a ton of really good movement skills. I think he can climb really well to the next level. I saw him pull as a guard against, what team was that? Florida. He just gets off his mark, snaps the ball before, I swear to God, it's in the hands of Carson Beck. He's already across the guard, ready to get out there and pull for ETN and get out in front of him. He moves so well, but he's got just that little bit of extra weight where he can be a really nice pop just because of the sand that's in his pants already. Furthermore, with that, he does a really, really good job both pass and run. He's got enough of a push to him where he can open up that lane. He's smart enough to know how to get on the shoulder of a defender and really get them out of the play. And in pass pro, it's not that he's going to pancake a guy necessarily and completely take him out of it. But once again, he's able to hold up his own. Really smart at knowing when to apply a double team. Always has his head up looking to see, hey, who's my lineman that needs help? Who do I need to step over and put a double team on or really help get that extra half second or 1 second for Carson Beck? Saw him at Tennessee. That was his worst game of the season by far. Watched him and Jake Majors back and forth. Boom, boom, boom. Those were the only 3 pressures that Jared Wilson has given up this season were at Tennessee. And I'm still watching him and Jared and Jake Majors and being like, man, these guys are really, really close. You take that game alone, he's kind of an average center. You look at any other game, him against Alabama, him against Florida, who I was talking about a little bit earlier. He's bright enough to pick up stunts and twists. He's powerful enough to open up the lane for ETN to run in. He is agile enough to move over in pass protection, get in front of the defensive interior players. Once again, we're talking about SEC players. We're looking at maybe, I'm not taking anything from ACC, but a player that's playing at Florida State or a player that's playing at Clemson, it's not quite the same as you're playing against Bama, Texas, Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss. Like, these guys are dudes that are going to be, the closest that you're going to see the NFL talent and really give you a good scope. And I loved what I saw from Brailsford with that. Run, pass, did not matter. He was impressive. He did a wonderful job of calling the bell, meeting the needs of his team, and being a rock for that offensive line group.
So, Clint, what do you think of Jared Wilson?
Got a lot with Wilson, and I'll try not to be super tangenty about it. If so, rein me in. I already said earlier about, I'd bet on him with the extra weight, considering the speed. It's like, this guy's got sub 4.9 foot speed. I mean, I'm not saying like 4.89. It's like, do I think he's hitting a 4.8 flat? Maybe pushing him. It's like, he's got sub 4.85 kind of wheels. And that's, for perspective, for anyone, that's freak. Like, freak kind of freak. You mentioned his pulling ability. It's elite, and that's the kind of stuff that's going to get this guy paid. Whether he comes out this year, not to get ahead of myself here, he comes out this year, I got a 3rd round grade on him. Like I said, I had Brailsford as a 4th, got him as a 3rd because I bet on some of that, additional weight in that anchor. I'll tell you, this is the kind of guy, you mentioned Linderbaum earlier. You mentioned some of those names. It's like, it's a guy that maybe comes back one more year. I think you start really get heavier into talking about being like a top 50 pick. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of plays that. You mentioned Cedric Van Pran, his predecessor at Georgia. Buddy, I was so high on Van Pran, you couldn't bring me down out of the clouds. Particularly the value for him to go on the 5th to Buffalo. That's one of my favorite recruitments I followed. Kirby pulling Van Pran out of Louisiana. He was a top interior in the state. That was a hell of a pull out of LSU's backyard. He was an absolute dog. I'm going to tell you, like I said earlier in the episode, I've gone to too many Georgia games to tell you, Van Pran's one of my favorites we've ever had. All that to say, Wilson had to wait his turn behind him, but, I've been hearing about him since the start. That was one of those great finds for Kirby, 3-star recruit out of North Carolina. It was one of those that they kept telling all of us the whole time. Kept telling us, this guy's under the radar. This guy's under the radar. This guy's under the radar. Boom. He's been nothing but great. I had on here, my negative note was so nitpicky. I just said work on his technical anchor. Not even work on his anchor, just the technical side of it, of just saying, I got to drop it. It's like, and I transitioned that into you said about, this is a guy that you made the little ACC dig. It's like, look, put my bias aside.
Oh, I did not mean for the ACC.
I'm joking.
Trey.
They're all coming after you, Newt. The entire conference is coming after you.
Oh, man. Clemson, Florida State, they're all going to be after me, man.
Yeah, you'll be okay. I think nobody's ever been too afraid of some of the bottom feeders. But what the hell was I saying? Good grief. Oh, I tied that into Georgia. It's like, look, take the bias out of it. That was a top 3 program, if not the top program in the country. In terms of doing it like the NFL does, and like if you were to say it's like the minor leagues, that's one of the first 1 or 2 or 3 the league looks at. Georgia, Bama, Ohio State, plus or minus, that's about it. Yep.
So the last 2 guys that we've covered could be going back to school. So both.
They both have eligibility.
Okay,
but I would also furthermore that kind of SEC vibe. It's like this is a guy that's working all year this year with 2 NFL starting offensive guards on each side of him. What did we just talk about? What do you want? Who's it you're looking for? This is a guy that's worked with Tate Ratledge to his side at right guard. As some Tate Ratledge, who's going to be a projected top, 2-round, 3-round pick. And then Fairchild, who Jim will tell you, that's my dude on the offensive interior. I'm higher than anybody.
Yeah, you're the one mocking him in round 1, right?
Fairchild's my guy. That's my guy. Everybody. If Fairchild goes in the 7th round, everyone on NFL Twitter is going to be at me being like, you stupid loser, you moron. And on the contrary, he goes in the top 50 picks. I'm going to be taking shots at my bar inside my house. And I'm going to look like
pulling out receipts. You're going to look like Deion Sanders in a press conference.
So
just like boom, boom, boom. Here it is.
But
I remember you. You were talking smack.
Channel. I'd rather have rational conversations here than deal with draft Twitter.
But you mentioned his ability to work with stunts and twists. It's just, and I tied that into saying he's worked with NFL caliber guard prospects. This guy has been at the number 1 program in the country with Kirby Smart, working behind when he was a reserve, working behind Cedric Van Pran, who was a 5th-round pick, should have been a 3rd-round pick, but that's another conversation for another day. This dude's going to be ready to roll, man. This dude's going to be ready to roll. The athletic upside. Wilson, if you had to pick someone on here of this list that the league is going to be way higher than draft media is right now, it's Wilson. That's the kind of guy that I think is like a name that some people are kind of starting to pick up on, and he's kind of in those talks. It's like, I think if you looked at 32 boards across the league, he's no lower than center 3's pushing it on it.
I saw Newt's board. Newt's definitely going to be higher, I think, on Wilson than because he's your center 1, right, Newt?
Jared Wilson is my center 1. He's I got a late 3rd, late second, early third.
If you did a consensus across the 32 teams boards, not media, just the NFL teams, he's the consensus one, in my opinion.
I think so. Okay, so let's pivot.
Oh,
let's pivot to Jake made. Oh, go for it.
Yeah. No. That's fine. I was just gonna say, just back to the graphic, and I don't know if I'm wrong here, because I was looking at it with Jared Wilson. Jim, you got him. You're being paid by the Georgia staff. You got him at 6'4", 325. Georgia lists him at 6'3", 310. So how much of a kickback are you getting here, man? Are we getting a part of this kickback that the Jared Wilson Foundation is sending your way?
Okay.
If I had to eyeball that, having watched him more than the two of you, the 325 is a little steep, but you're not asinine to say he's over 3. I'd say you could call that a cool 315 and get away with it.
Georgia lists him at 310.
So Clint, take Jake Majors away, and I'll see if I can find where I found that on Wilson. Because I still have it in my Google search, so I just got to go find it.
I'll take Majors, and I'm going to do a cheat. And I'm going to say one last note about Wilson. I liked how Newt mentioned how Tennessee this year was no doubt his toughest game of the year. They got 2 top 75 picks on that D-line.
Yep.
Just to say, it's not like the kid came out and laid an egg against, Helen Keller's School for the Blind. Like, he was going against James Pearson a lot. They got some cats on that D-line. That's a big game. But throwing it quickly over to Majors. Majors was somebody that I had some familiarity with. And when Jim told me yesterday about, hey, get on the show, I kind of had to do a little bit of catch up. But he was one that I had to do a little bit of catching up today. But in looking at it and cutting the tape back on it, it just added to what I had thus far known. Some quick points. His last 3 years, he's got 37 games played, 2,300 plus snaps, specifically at center. He's only given up 1 sack, 4 hits in that time. He's got about a flat 5-second speed. That's all you need. Real technical vet. My notes as far as improvement were a little nitpicky. I said improve his power, his anchor, and just the pop in his hands. And I think that goes back to this is a guy in terms of his athletic ability. He's a mid-day 3 all day. But he's the kind of guy. What was kind of if you looked at the buzzwords of the episode that Clint's used, when I talked about some of these synergies, like what are you looking for? What are you trying to get here? What are you trying to get with Majors? It's like, if you're trying to get a guy that you're like, I got a mid-day 3, and I need to get an interior, a guy that can play some center and get some real snaps for cheap here, that's got some starting kind of upside, but in the time that I'm developing him, say maybe behind an older aging vet or maybe behind a guy who's got a year till free agency, you get the point. He's somebody that situationally it's going to be interesting to see. Some team's going to like him. Because some team, and I said earlier about everyone loves to talk about, find a left tackle. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy in this stuff. Let me see the center that's a difference maker. It's like somebody's going to look at this guy and be like, this guy's got, by the time the season's over, assuming his health, this guy's got over 2,500 snaps playing at Texas, playing for Sark, playing SEC Big 12 ball. A mid-day 3, we can't screw this up. Let's get some mileage out of this kid on a rookie contract. He's going to be a good, solid mid-day 3 pick for somebody.
I love that. I think that's like really, really well said. So, just to kind of go beyond technical points and what you're looking at for Jake Majors, because Clint laid it out beautifully. He's got the size. He's got the frame. Obviously, like some programs will look at him a little bit different in terms of like what does he offer you, but the amount of snaps that he has under his belt, every single one of them at Texas, it has been at center. He is seasoned to this. Kind of pigeonholes himself a little bit, but man, you look for a guy where you're like, hey, we want a center to take over in a year.
Not to cut you off, but like I love that point. Like I would ask you. You said the pigeonhole thing, and I agree with you. You're right. But I almost wonder with Majors if I almost wonder if part of his charm is that, like, with his athletic ability, he's so committed in his experience to center. Because it's like, you put this guy at guard, he's not going to have the athletic buildup to hang. But it's almost like a case of, like, knowing what you're good at, which it's like he has not gone out there and put bad guard tape out because he's not one.
Right.
You know, it's like,
right.
I mean, he doesn't have one snap other than center.
No, it's
yeah. I mean,
so
it's not one.
I actually looked. He's got, if you count his redshirt season, he's pushing, like, count redshirt season, count bowls and everything. He's pushing 3,300. Like,
great point.
All of that, but every single snap is there is not one inline tight end. We're looking like nothing. It is at center, and this is
kid's not going out there for the extra point.
No.
Be the lead man.
But like, so kind of speaking beyond that, he's 22 years old, redshirt senior at Texas. The minute he got handed the reins, like, hey, here's your redshirt freshman year, he's been the center, 4-year starter for Texas. That's how you get that many snaps. Is you're out there playing as a starter.
And what did I just say about the played at Georgia, the top program? It's like, that's big boy shit.
Yeah,
you're right.
I mean, it's impressive stuff when you look at Texas has come back to the limelight as a program. Like I said, Clint said his ability and everything perfectly. I think that Majors is a day 3 guy. Right now, I got a 4th round grade on him. Here's the things that, once again, this is what Rylie Mills is doing for me that is, opposed to a lot of other players. You look at Jake Majors, he's up for the Jason Witten Collegiate Man of the Year. If you don't know the Jason Witten Collegiate Man of the Year is, that is the player in college football who displays the highest character of any player that is a senior or grad.
The Walter Payton Man of the Year.
It's what it is. It's the college version of the Walter Payton Man of the Year. He is currently one of these semifinalists for that award.
I wasn't aware of that. Good point.
He's also a semifinalist for the Campbell Trophy, and he is been named on the watch list for the Remington. Like,
nice.
Was every collegiate award you could look for as a redshirt senior offensive lineman for a top tier program. Jake Majors is checking off every single one of those. It's through his work ethic, it's through the experience that he has, and it's through the character that he brings to that program of Texas. And that I think, honestly, no matter where he goes, you're going to see a player that day in, day out is going to be there bright and early, going to be coachable, and then move forward and be a huge addition to your program.
Well, and I would just piggyback off that. That was so well said about some of that. It's like, that's the kind of guy that, because teams are going to be, those teams blow up Kirby's phone. Those teams blow up Sark's phone. Those teams blow up DeBauer's phone. It's like, that's the kind of guy they call, and Sark's telling them, like, this kid's not going to give you a moment of headache. He's going to end up playing for you for 4, 5, 6 years. You're going to get a ton of mileage out of him. This kid lives, breathes, and eats this stuff. For a mid-day 3, I said a 6, you said a 4th. Call him a cool fit. You can't screw this up.
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, I'm higher on him than consensus. I know I'm higher on you, but those are the intangibles that obviously, like, saw it with Rylie Mills, but those are the things that, like, man, if you're going to be out there and you're going to work your ass off and you've shown that you can be a solid player in this position, over 4 years starting at Texas, he has allowed 3 sacks over his entire career. 3,300 snaps we're talking about at Texas. 3 sacks total. 46 total pressures over 3,300. You're talking about fractions of a percentage right here. This is a kid that has shown he knows that he can do. Is he the most athletic? No. Is he the strongest? No. Is he the highest IQ and going to be the hardest worker? Man, maybe. And that's a player that, if I'm not looking to get a day 1, day 2 center, man, I'm going to target him as like, hey, I need a center, or I might need a center in a year or 2 years. I want this guy on my draft board. And if he falls to us, I'm going to take advantage of that.
Cool. So Newt took a few minutes to use some new functionality, NFL Draft Fanatics, to build up a center board. So even though we've only covered 4 of them on this episode, Nate, you want to just kind of go through 1 through 7 and which rounds you have them in?
Yeah. I've talked about, where Jared Wilson and Parker Brailsford are for me. Jared Wilson sits on that late second, early third. He's my center 1. I really, really like the kid. If you're projecting him, you talked about Clint with him talking about, going back, following the Van Pran route and really, really bolstering his stock. He's got the opportunity to, but he's also playing between those 2 hog mollies with Fairchild and Ratledge. It's like, man, you're probably set up the best that you possibly can. I'm not saying that he wouldn't improve his draft stock, but late second, early thirds where I've got Wilson, Parker Brailsford, kind of same vein. He's a pretty solid mid third round grade for me. And then you have like this clump, like I said, Majors and Monheim that I talked about. And I know Clint loves Logan Jones, as he kind of blew up a little bit earlier over his excitement. Those guys all kind of sit in that 4th, 5th round. Like, hey, if you want a center, obviously Monheim's a little bit different. And we talked about him. It's not if you need a center from Monheim. It's like, hey, do you need to have a guy that can just step in and be a do-it-all player? But I got Majors, Jones, and Monheim is that like early to mid day 3. And then Bryce Foster and Jake Slaughter, I got draftable grades on both of them. I think they both kind of came in with that like 5th, 6th, 6th, 7th, respectively for their grades. I like their, their frame, their build. They're both a little bit bigger guys, both sitting 6'5" with a little bit more weight. But I think that the traits, especially with a top 2 put out in terms of just purely their athletic ability, kind of like buried them in terms of, what you could get earlier versus what you'd settle for later.
Good. And if obviously there's only about 3 people in the history of the world that have generated these graphics. One is me. I'm the one that designed the functionality, and one is Newt. And then while this podcast was going on, I saw another one that was out on Twitter. But what I want to point out is the colors are fixed. So meaning that if anybody else generates the same graphic and they add the tiers, nobody can change the color codes. So if you see somebody's ranking, or you see that somebody has Jake Majors in that magenta color and then there's another player in the magenta color, they're projecting them in the same round. That's essentially what that means. So it'll probably take a while for the world to get used to the color codes. But I did shout out to Joe Marino. The color codes came from your draft board when you did a podcast 6 months ago. So that's a shout out to Joe Marino, because that's where I got the idea for the color codes. But anyways, I appreciate, we have 75 people watching right now. So please hit the like on YouTube. Hit the subscribe on YouTube. This channel has draft content like this every day. Tomorrow, we got some wide receivers and corners coming at you with myself, Bill, and Randall. And then also, before you go, find NFL Draft Weston on X. Give him a follow. Find at NFL Draft Dome. Find Clint on Twitter. Give him a follow. There's a lot of draft conversation on Twitter. We're going to bring that all to a podcast every day on this channel. So a lot of the people that you follow for draft Twitter are also podcasting on this channel. And that's the idea of being an NFL draft fanatic. So appreciate everybody. Thank you very much. Have a good night.